Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us for what is not quite the final panel, but we're onto the home straight of what has been an absolutely amazing 2 days of programme. If you've been sticking with us all the way through since yesterday morning, I'm sure you'll agree that the Queen's team have put together an amazing selection of events and panellists, and today's event continues. So I hope we're going to have a really great discussion this afternoon. My name is Sarah Hesketh, and I am a writer and editor and sometimes dabbler in the world of dementia. And I'm joined today by a panel that is international in its location and its working. So the event today is going to run, so our panellists are all going to speak a little about their experiences and their work to start with, and then we're going to have a general discussion amongst ourselves, and then we will be opening up to questions at the end. So do have a think about your questions as we go along, and we'll try and get to them as many as possible. I'm aware it's quite a short event at only an hour, but we'll do our best to get through the points that are raised. So to introduce our speakers today, first of all, we're going to hear in just a moment from Professor Kate de Medeiros, who is based at Miami University, not in Florida, but in fact in Ohio, and she is joining us live from there today. Kate is the O'Toole Professor of Gerontology, and she has worked in many different ways internationally, looking at friendship between older people with dementia and creativity in care settings. And we were just talking about how her new research is looking at people who are living alone with dementia and the difficulties of that particular kind of work during a pandemic setting. Also joining us, we have Sinead Devine, who is a little bit closer to home. She's in Derry today. And Sinead has been a community arts facilitator for over 30 years in Derry, starting out at the Derry Playhouse, working there, and more recently at the Old Library Trust, developing a range of activities for people with dementia. Our third panellist, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice, is not Susanna Howard, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but she has been succeeded, I won't even say replaced, by Shazia Qureshi, who is a brilliant poet and translator who works with Susanna at Living Words and is going to give us an insight into their work. So Kate, I think we're going to start off with you, and you're going to kind of give us a little bit more background on your research and also talk a little bit more about the benefits that creativity in care settings can bring. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. The thing I want to talk about is the transformative power of creativity and the values of risk and value and how those come together to really transform experiences. So, when we think about dementia care, especially in care homes or nursing homes, the value is often placed on minimizing risk. So, we don't want somebody to be injured or to fall or to be malnourished or other things. In the US, they say that the nursing homes are more regulated than the nuclear power industry. So there are copious records kept on every aspect of daily life, except the parts of life that some would argue make life worth living. So, here is risk as something to be mitigated. And part of that overall, Goffman total institution, where, you're living in a place where the values of the institution are what form your daily living. And so, in contrast, though, if we think about risk, not as, something that's related to personal harm, but something that's part of the human experience, we can think about, the origins of the word. So riscare from the Italian meaning to venture, or French, the word aventure, sailing against the wind. Sometimes we forget about that in the context of trying to keep people safe. What the arts do, and the real importance of the creative arts, is it opens people up to the kinds of risks that are an essential part of everyday living. So when we think about our everyday risks, outside of an institution, we may have a risk of starting a new friendship and having that go bad, or a risk of presenting ourselves at something like a conference and having it fall flat. But, along with that risk is a certain sense of a daring adventure, of anticipation, excitement. And that's something that's really missing in a lot of care settings. When we think about the values of the arts in care settings, I know I can speak for the U.S. Often the arts and creative engagement have a very low value. It's something that people might plug in as part of an activity. Generally, the feeling isn't that it's art per se, it's more arts and crafts. So, very typical to walk into a nursing home and see people maybe coloring a picture or cutting things out of construction paper. Very low risk, very low value. When arts, programs are brought in, often it's in the context of other things happening. So staff may not appreciate what's happening with the creative engagement. So they might vacuum during your poetry session, or they might come and take people out to go to the hair salon in the middle of, storytelling or whatever. So there is a lack of value. What Ann Basing and I, Ann just finished a 2-year embedded theater project in nursing homes in rural Kentucky, 15 nursing homes, where she infused the concept of Peter Pan over the course of a year, and it culminated in performances at 3 of the nursing homes. So that's the context. I won't give you a lot of detail, since others here will be able to share their projects. But there are 3 essential parts of imagination and creativity that lead to this kind of transformative creativity that's really important to have when you're living, especially in a nursing home. One is the opportunity to have imagination made concrete. One is that creativity is intentional and not just, the product of happenstance or chance. And then 3 is that something surprising and unexpected emerges. And that's different, of course, again, than the activities that might just be arts and craft. So what, Ann and I really argue is that when we think about care and we think about care for dementia, an essential part of that really needs to be transformative creativity. It needs to be a value. Transformative creativity gives opportunities for people living with dementia and those who care for them, not only to exercise their imagination, but also to witness their creative efforts. And doing that can bring about profound social change. It is that tripartite imagination, made concrete. It's intentional, and it leads to something surprising. And overall, this power of creativity is what makes the difference between living a life and living a life worth meaning, and fearing a life in an institution, especially where it just goes hand in hand that we don't think about flourishing in a nursing home or flourishing with dementia. But if we can get into this transformative creativity mindset, we can shift our values to really valuing what it means to be human and what it means to take risks, and how important that is to our sense of who we are, no matter where we are on the neurocognitive spectrum. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kate, for that opening set of ideas. There are quite a few great points in there that I know we're going to come back to. But I think we're just going to move on to Sinead, who is given us a little bit more background about the kind of work that she's done more locally in Derry. So Sinead, I'm going to pass over to you.
Okay, Sarah, just going to turn this. So thank you very much. DEET is Dementia Engaged and Empowered Derry and Strabane, where we provide person-centred and arts-based activities out in the community. So we have 5 satellite projects, including our own then at the Old Library Trust. And I just want to show you an overview of how we've used the literary arts of spoken word, reading, writing, and theatre to engage those living with dementia, but they're out in the community, unlike Kate's project. So just a wee bit of background to DEET until the pandemic. We've, as I say, 6 social groups. So those groups do a wide range of activities and projects, and do a lot of the connecting to the community as well through their programs. So, for instance, linking to different art centres. Then we have single focus activity groups. So we have our choir, we have arts and crafts, we have a Love to Move group, we have men's exercise as well, because we have a balance between keeping people mobile and active and healthy, as well as the cognitive stimulation that things like arts activities can provide. We have a wide range of connecting to the community opportunities, including intergenerational opportunities, which are really, really important for people with dementia. And then we have a wide range of cinema-friendly events like cinema days, dinner dances, dementia-friendly performances, things that we might take for granted going out to these museum places and participating in those kind of things. So we operate from Mike Nolan's Six Senses framework as a basis for all our work. We all need, to feel safe, to feel secure. As human beings, we need to belong to valued groups to maintain and help form important relationships. And when you get a diagnosis of dementia, that sense of belonging can, be eradicated very, very quickly as people withdraw and sometimes even self-isolate themselves. Continuity, making links between the past, present, and the future. We all need the sense of having a purpose, to enjoy meaningful activities, to have valued goals. We all need to feel that we're still able to achieve things and to have significance. And what I'd like to show is that the arts can really provide those things. With the literary arts, the spoken word, reading, writing, and theatre, first on my list is listening. That is the key because it's about having their voices heard. It's about making choices, informing us of their needs and wishes in the groups. It's about hearing their stories, having conversations and making connections. So if I said the key word for us is about making connections for people with dementia could be a theme to whatever activity we are doing. And if you think about some people with dementia have actually lost the ability to initiate conversations. So you can become very isolated and lonely. So the importance of their stories, telling their story, life story work, reminiscence obviously to aid this. Then theatre and cinema performances, participatory drama opportunities, music and song, don't forget about that, the lyrics in particular, reading stories to aid conversations, and then poetry. So this is a program that we did for carers at home, actually, to teach them about how to do activities, and a lot of them were arts-based. So this is Jerry, and Jerry has done some writing here. This is his life story, his flower exercise. Then he made it into a coat of arms. And then it led to an exploration of home, and this is his home in the past in Dunleary. Here's his lovely red door, and there's boats in the sea. That led then to conversations and then to the making of this beautiful collage. Here's his red door again. This is his boat, his father's boat, and his grandfather's boat, because they were all in the Merchant Navy. So I hear my own story. My story is important. We hear your story. Yes, your story is important. And then this lovely sensory exploration through clay. Now, what was really quite interesting about this program, when we taught his daughter to do these things with her father, she said, I have moved from being father and carer back to being father and daughter again. It was Jerry and Jackie once more. And she said that was quite phenomenal because everything was centered around medication, around sleep patterns, around having him to try and get him to eat better, etc. And this was actually leading back to that path, which was really, really lovely. We use a lot of storytelling as well in our groups, both people presenting stories, but then that leads to our members actually telling their stories. During the pandemic, we had to put it up on our social media and on our YouTube channel for people to actually connect with. What we noticed then was carers saying, how much they missed conversations. If you are at home with somebody who has lost their words, that cannot recognize words, cannot speak words anymore, as a carer, you can become very isolated as well. So when we were offered through Liz Weir, the Armstrong Storytelling Trust, a Zoom group to do storytelling there and then in situ. We just jumped at the chance, and that was funded by the Arts Council's Arts and Older People's Fund. And just, the carers and people coming back to saying, I really missed conversation. This has been absolutely wonderful. We've made connections again. So there's that word again, connections. Also, I'm just trying to show here that sensory work is really, really important to build bridges for communication gaps. So here we have like a seaside theme, and we're adopting now the 5 senses: what I hear, see, taste, touch, smell. And then what can I make? What can I write? So we start off with a music or a soundscape to evoke the summer, listening to songs, listening to the lyrics, things even as simple as she sails on the seashore. I can't even say it. That rhythm and rhyme of words that really makes that connection, and using poetry as well. What do I see? It can be photographs of holidays and travel, reminiscing. There's that conversation, listening again. What do I taste? Bringing it alive, the smell and taste of fish and chips, tasting ice cream. What do I touch? Foraging on the beach, touching objects that can be used in artwork, sand, shells, seaweed. What do I smell? The sea, the seaweed, the fish and chips. What can I make? Anything from a seaside plate, an ice cream sundae, pictures, a seascape, a photo story. For Margaret, surfing life, smell the sea and feel the sky, let your soul and spirit fly. Margaret's favourite places are all in Donegal. So we wrote a postcard after this and we recorded our favourite holiday memories. So this is just a wee bit about theatre performance. First Act Youth Theatre came to 2 of our groups. We brought them together for South Pacific. But what was really key to the success of this was the prep that we did with the young people, that we showed them that, this, to make something dementia friendly as a performance, they had to cut down the performance. They had to have the key kind of elements of the story, all the lovely music. You can see some of the words, some enchanted evening, get a load of honey bun tonight, all those lovely lyrics that the audience were able to remember. But when I do prep work with young people, we look at what is dementia. We use poetry like Front Door. We use The Forgetful Elephant for younger children. On a lighter side, we do Warning by Jenny Joseph, just about older age. But we were showing the young people as well that some people might get up, some people might call out, some people might join in with you, they might join you on stage, just to prepare them for that. So when it did happen, it was great. They were able to interact. It just became part of the performance. And then that led to, at the end, this lovely intergenerational engagement. They taught them talking, happy talk. And they all kind of did that together at the end, and then they danced. And it was just a beautiful event that we had where it led from being an audience member to being, that participatory arts element as well. This is an older people's drama group, Top 10 Women's Drama Group, and they presented there's a thing about dairy sons being spoilt. So this is about a spoilt boy. And what we were teaching the women's drama group to do was to be very expressive, to tell it with your eyes, tell it with your face, to bridge that communication gap. So if they don't understand every word that's being said, they know the mommy's really annoyed because you can see she's really annoyed on her face. So all of that just to bridge those communication gaps. And then, characters being developed by our members. At different events, the dressing up, the creating of characters. We did a thing about celebrities in summertime from the 50s and 60s. And here's one of the members actually dressed up, and we were doing a wee bit of role play with that. Poetry is wonderful because of the rhythm and rhyme of poetry. It really connects for people with dementia. A lot of older people with dementia, of course, have learned poems by rote in their childhood and suddenly can just begin to tell a poem straight, that once they start to hear the words, can really join in. And we had that experience in an intergenerational program that we did, where members were actually able to say lines of poems, word for word. We used local poems online. Sometimes it's not just about guns like William Wordsworth, and because we're making connections in rural communities as well. And this is a local poet, Bridget McCluskey, that you see. But then I've used, for instance, Seamus Heaney's poem, Blackberry Picking, for an orientation into the autumn, just before the pandemic started. We started off with the lovely poetry. Some of them knew the poems, but then it led on to them telling us stories about blackberry picking when they were younger. So that's their story. And then we finished making jam from blackberries and apples. And then they went home with their jar of jam. Kate, when I did the reading rooms in care homes, including dementia units, we used the stories and the poems as a jumping off point to have conversations and for people to tell their stories, because you can be very isolated and lonely, even in a crowded room in a care home. If your peripheral vision is gone and you've people either side of you, you can be very isolated. What that program tried to do was help care staff as well to get to know their residents better. So that was quite a phenomenal outcome of the program. So poetry and stories are an amazing way to learn other people's stories. So thank you. It's just a quick snapshot of how we use literary arts with our project. It's really about helping them make connections and then for that self-expression for members to tell their own story. So when word finding and word recognition or the ability to read or say words goes, you can still use the literary arts to engage. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. Thank you for giving us a whistle-stop tour of what sounds like an amazing programme that you've been putting together. Shazia, we're going to move on to you to hear a little bit more about your work as an artist in residence with Living Words. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about that, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion between us.
Great, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to jump right in. So yes, I've been an artist in residence for about 7 years now. So this is an example of someone expressing themselves. So we write down people's words. And what's interesting for us as writers, and we're all sorts of artists, but we are all writers, is the words that people use that we may not completely understand, for example, what this person meant by a tone, but it has great meaning and significance for that person. And, you know, we can get a sense of what it is that they're saying. I'm just going to read this extract. Again, these are the words of someone we worked with. Cannot be missed. One is not doing it again. It is there. You listen at a different level because we happen on a different level. So as part of our methodology, well, first of all, this refers to the first person that Susanna, my colleague, who's the founder and artistic director of Living Words, the first woman that she worked with a dementia, when they'd finished working together, the woman said to her, now you know two worlds, the world out there and the world inside of me, and you've got to go out and tell the people. And that became the mission for Susanna and for Living Words. So we work one-to-one with people, you know, with, not to, very close up, very often people who are bedbound, and also very often people who staff may say, oh, this person doesn't talk very much, very often people who are isolated. Yes, so here's someone else, people working our Listen Out Loud methodology. We work with pen and paper, so we have a pad. We write down what the person is saying, we write down their words, and we read them back to them so they can see and they can sense that we are hearing them, and we read back so they can hear their words back. And then we, together, we co-create pieces with them and make books of their words. So this is someone I worked with, Marjorie. This is a book of her words, and we do print it out quite big because some people are still able to read. And that is what she chose for the cover. There's a video here which I'm going to skip past because we don't have time. I'm going to, and this is my colleague Pippa, working with someone who didn't engage until Pippa had just gone back and sat with her and worked with her several times. I'll just go through these. At the end of, so we do residencies in care homes and nursing homes, and at the end we have a sharing where people's friends and families are invited. Very often people love to look at their books themselves and they share their books. These are residents here. And at the sharing, they might want to read from their book themselves, or sometimes they would prefer for their book to be read to them. And usually we would just choose with them a piece. Here's my colleague Oliver, the sharings are very lively. So people, I think someone mentioned before, people might call out, someone might just stand up and start walking. And this is a gentleman whose words were being read. So Oliver was just trying to keep up with him there. Very often people like their words to be performed to them. And here's Susanna. So this lady had her family round, and she wanted Susanna to perform to her. And also, as part of this residency, we had 3 singers who composed songs. And so they were singing this lady's words back to her. This is a lady I worked with, Juanita, and she would sit on her own. She wasn't really interacting with many people. She absolutely loved the process. So this is John Offen, who's sadly died since. Susanna worked with him, and his daughter Jackie. Obviously, and Susanna worked with him, and a song was made of his words. And also, as part of our residencies, we work with staff. It's a very big part of our work is to support staff and to work with them. So as you can see, so one of these ladies had a book of her words. So we do this with a few people, and we also have training sessions to show staff how to use people's books with them, because the idea is that the books become a communication bridge so that friends and carers can read them with the person as a way of opening communication. So, we really feel that our residencies are the beginning of something rather than something that begins and ends with us. So yes, and staff get certificates. So these are all staff that we worked with at the sharings. And then COVID happened. So obviously we could not go into care homes anymore. And Susanna had been in, there were a lot of carers who got in touch with Susanna and just said how difficult things were. And so we piloted a project called Bringing the Inside Out, where we worked remotely with carers and activity coordinators for them to trial using our methodology working with residents. And so this anthology, Bringing the Inside Out, had the words of carers, residents, and family members, their words about the impact of the pandemic on them. And I'm just going to play this. This was a breakout Zoom session during our action learning with carers.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed the experience. You don't always get the time to do one-to-ones.
I was put forward for this. I didn't know anything about it at first. And when I read through it, I'm sorry to say I was a little bit sceptical, and I'm sorry. But when I actually did it, it was so uplifting that I could get to somebody by just saying different words.
They actually know that you're listening to them. And yeah, I mean, I've seen it with the one lady that, as I say, she'd just sit in a chair and that was it. That was all she'd do. Now I can actually have a little bit of a conversation with her.
It's amazing how I can see them seeing me differently. Do you know that?
When you actually write somebody's words down and when it's read back, is the words coming alive, as if the words are actually breathing.
I can't join in with them, see them, be part of it, but I can't. Have calls and windows, but it's not the same. What they call it? The key. Key, just the key, an ordinary key to keep me together. I feel as though I'm doing something.
So yes, actually, the project was so successful that we're going to be running 2 action learning courses with carers starting in January, so January and February of next year. So if there are any carers watching, they will all be online. Yes, the last project went really well. Another part of our mission is that we after working one-to-one with people, we take their words out to the public. And this is because it's very much something that we do, which is to we want to create quality artistic experiences that challenge accepted perceptions of communication and of the dementias as well. So they can be performances like Where Now, that was our first anthology, some more performances and more here. And actually we are putting together a performance coming from the project Bringing the Inside Out, which we are planning to be touring next year. So perhaps we'll even come to you in Belfast. We're hoping to take it nationwide, as the project was nationwide. So this is John Offen and his song called Funny Old World in It, was sung at the Royal Festival Hall in London with a full choir. And yes, so more performances here, and all the songs that were done in the residency were also played here at the festival. And I think we're coming now, this is taking us right to the end. And those are the words of a resident living with dementia without any changes. We don't change or move words around at all. Okay, and that's me.
Thank you, Shazia. Thank you for sharing your work with us. There are so many points that we could be discussing, but I thought actually it might be interesting to come back to start with something that Kate was talking about right at the beginning about the question of value. And I think something that if you are what we might call community arts facilitator, or an artist that wants to work in these kinds of settings, or even an academic that wants to go in and work in these kinds of ways, how actually you might convince staff, family, people with dementia that actually what you're doing is of value, and it is something of interest, and something that will be of benefit to people who are living in these kinds of settings or working there. And so I just wondered, maybe if we start with you, Sinead, how you sort of had to make the case for the kind of work, or whether you found people to be kind of quite welcoming to the kind of work you want to do.
It's different. I suppose I've done both in care homes. The reading rooms was in care homes, and now we're out in the community. I know in care homes it's even difficult to get your foot in the door, and even to get the ear of a manager. But once you do, and once you have conversations about what you'd like to do. But you're right, Kate, about the value of the work as well, because sometimes we had to really encourage carers to stay in the room. First of all, for health and safety issues, but also you will learn something here. And then when they really started to say, I think sometimes when it comes, to talking about literature, some people are very afraid of it. Oh, I'm not, that's not for me. I didn't get the education you had. So it's really to allay all of those fears, first of all, and then just to give people an opportunity. Sometimes you have to. We always, let's do a wee test run. Let's just have a go. If you have a go and you don't like it, no harm done. But nobody's ever come back to me and said, no, we don't want to do it once we've started, a kind of activity. Now I have to say, But again, you know, even out in the community, we've had carers say to us, he's not going to like that. She's not going to like that. I don't know why you're doing that, because that's not going to work. And you have to say to them very, very gently, don't take that person's personhood away. Let them decide for themselves what they would like to do. Let them have a go. Maybe they've never experienced anything like this before. And if they don't like it, that's okay. They don't have to do it. They don't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. And I suppose that's part of the challenge, finding things in a group setting where everybody can get something from it.
And Kate, does that sort of chime with your experience as well?
Yes, absolutely. I see often carers and again in nursing homes, they're so focused on the safety. And if it's not about safety, then it's not important. And so, you know, it's hard to do something like a poetry intervention. One local nursing home, we did Gary Glazner's Alzheimer's Poetry Project. And the staff were just horribly annoyed. I mean, and they would just do everything they could just to disrupt, you know, to vacuum, to do things. Unfortunately, we did not involve them, which, Sinead, I think that what you're doing is really key, is getting the staff to be present and to participate, because I think there is that element of personal risk that once you take it and then you realize how exciting and fulfilling it can be, then you see it very differently. But I see that as a real big barrier to getting people to value these kinds of programs, which are really important.
I guess to kind of maybe turn that question slightly on its head.
Can I just respond to that as well?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we've found very much, Sinead, you know, what you were talking about, we've had a lot of that experience as well. Carers, there are some carers who are not, you know, who are very suspicious or think it's a waste of time. They have, you know, understandably very practical things. You know, carers are so very often overworked. And one of the things we do, we are huge champions for carers. And so we work very closely with carers. We very often, if you do if you work with someone and make just a very small book of their words, they can just see. It's by being involved in that process, they can see it, and the staff training as well. We just it's very much a way for people to experience, and also they see the words. We put the words of residents up on the wall at the beginning, and we just ask them to look and see if they know who that was. And a lot of people are really surprised by that, and the residents as well. Sometimes there'll be someone very isolated, and you know, we'll just say. You know, I'll say, my name is Shazia, I'm a writer. Is it all right if I just sit down with you? And then, you know, I might just ask them a question. We don't ask very much, and then write down the words and read it. So it's very much that kind of listening and speaking back and validating. And, you know, we're very person-led. So if somebody really is not up for it, then, you know, then that's it. But usually most people do come around.
What you're saying there, Shazia, about being kind of very person-led in your approach, and if somebody isn't up for it, then you know, you can kind of walk away and just leave them. I think something in my own practice I was totally mindful of is the idea that often, especially people with quite advanced physical conditions, may not be in a position to sort of say no to these kinds of activities. And sort of some of the worst activity I saw was just where kind of, you know, there was a local panto company come in and people are just wheeled in en masse and kind of left there to experience whatever is kind of being put in front of them with very little kind of choice or agency. There was quite a lot of chat yesterday in the ethics panel about power dynamics and how it's an extraordinarily complex network because there are, you know, so many people involved. Once somebody has a diagnosis, there is the kind of medical side, but there's also the kind of family side, and then who has agency. And so I guess the kind of we as practitioners might be convinced of the value of what it is that we do. But the kind of question I want to throw back is there always a value to what we do? And that that power dynamic, have you ever felt in your own practice that you needed to be mindful of that, and how have you negotiated it? And I think, Shazia, you've already sort of outlined that for us a little bit.
We absolutely, there are some people who I've gone back and, as you said, you know, the only thing they have, the only power that they have is to say no. And so, you know, I would say, I'm going to go away. You know, I can hear sometimes I'll say, do you mind if I just, you know, sit here a bit longer? And then, you know, they might get used to me and start talking. But sometimes I'll just say, I'm going to go away now. I'll come again at a time that might be better for you. And then I'll try again. And then I'll try again. There's one lady I tried 8 times. But she was so, I had just had a real feeling. She was so isolated. She didn't talk to anybody. She stayed in her room all day. She was mobile. And in the end, she just had a book with, I think, 4 pages, very short. And in 2 of them, she talked about waiting for her daughter. She was waiting for her daughter. And so when her daughter came to visit, she could see that. And the lady was just, she would say to me each time, you've come back. I didn't think you'd come back. So it's very important for the way that we work that the power is very much with the person, and we can just make the offer, which is, you know, that's all we do.
Sinead, I was wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about where and if you have actually involved people with dementia in your project design, if that's something that you've made efforts to try and do. There was, again, I think it was Pete Middleton yesterday was bringing up again that phrase, you know, nothing about us without us, and actually involving people with dementia in the initiatives that they're then participating in is something that could be really important.
Yes, even on the whole run up to the creating deeds, people with dementia were informing us about what it was that they wanted. They wanted something out in the community. They wanted something that they could come to weekly. They wanted things that had a broad range of things, because some people do like other, one thing, somebody else likes something else. So it was very much about choice, so when we go into a group, to begin with, it's just about trying to get to know them. So I use Names by Wendy Cope as a starting off point as a poem. So it's all about how your name changes from, Elizabeth, Lilibet, Love, Dear, Mrs., right through to the very end when they weren't calling her by the name that she was known by. And then asking them about, so how did you get your name? So you might go on with something initially, but then it's about opening up that conversation to say, this is just something we did today. What do you actually like? What are you interested in doing? But that process even starts before they come to us, because in the referral form, we try to get that kind of information. We try to get a wee bit of life story work as well when we go out to actually visit them. So even by the time they come to us, we have, a wide range of information of things that we know that they're likely to be able to engage in. So that from the outset is really important.
Kate, do you want to tell us a little bit about your own projects in that vein?
So right now I'm working on a study on people living alone with dementia. It takes place in Baltimore, Maryland. And one of the things that when we think about dementia, and a lot of the really great programs incorporate people who have access to, maybe they have a caregiver, or maybe they have access to amenities of a city. And so these folks are people who live in apartments who, what we're finding is they're so afraid of being labeled as somebody with a cognitive impairment that they tend to then be isolated. And, it's estimated that up to 1/3 of people who have some kind of a cognitive impairment, MCI, mild cognitive impairment, or form of dementia actually live alone. And it's a group that we know very little about because they don't have access to the services, or they choose not to, or they don't have an active care partner or family member or things. And so it's been really eye-opening to think about dementia from a very different point of view. A lot of it involves socioeconomic status, and again, isolation within housing communities and this incredible fear. And then risk, of course, takes a whole nother level of meaning, because then you've got the balance of risk of safety. One of the people we interviewed is driving on an expired driver's license because she's afraid of what will happen if she goes to get her license renewed. But it's very dangerous for her to be driving. And so it's a really interesting and complicated world to try to get a view on, and to try to understand, what at what point is it too risky? What are the normal risks? And, who has the authority to kind of change that?
I'm kind of glad that you brought us back to the question of risk, because obviously we've talked about the risks that are there for people who are participating in these programs, but I'm conscious there might be quite a few people watching this today who are practitioners themselves and who are kind of wanting to do more of this work or doing it already. And so my kind of question to each of you really is how you have potentially encountered and protected yourself from the risks that might be there for facilitators and practitioners in this kind of work. Now, that might be kind of physical risk, or it might be sort of the emotional risk that comes from working with very fragile people. So I don't know, Shazia, maybe you might want to speak to that first.
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good point. I think boundaries are very important, and part of our training, as an artist, we do learn you do have to be very boundaried, particularly the way we work with people, which is very intimate, and very often we're working with someone towards the end of their life, and it's a huge privilege, the things people share with you, the words they share with you in their thoughts. This one lady, said to me, "Am I dead?" She kept saying, "Am I dead?" And to not sort of brush away anything, that everything they say is welcome. A lot of people say they're waiting for death, but I think over time we've just learned, and also we have a lot of support, so we have supervision as well, just to make sure that we're not taking on any of those things. Usually the care staff and the managers are quite good in terms of physical risk and things like that. So yeah, I would just say, like, sort of being very clear about boundaries is really important in this sort of work, I think. Yeah.
We're getting a bit tight in time, but I wonder, Sinead, whether you just had anything to add to that in terms of the work that you and your staff have done.
No, I would agree, because there is, when people start to tell their story, there can be, an emotive element to that, even in terms of things like trauma that they've, if you think, in Northern Ireland, even the trauma of the conflict, and that sometimes that comes up. So it's not to push that away or not to engage with it. You have to let people speak and tell their story, but it is to follow up. I think it's really important that we follow up with family if something has been raised that has been very emotive for them. And also, to listen, to have empathy, to reassure, but also to follow up as well, I think is very, very key, that, to let the family know. So it has been upset today. This is, we were doing life story work. This is what's come up. And just to make them aware of it, so they have that support when they go back home.
I'm going to switch us over to kind of our audience questions. We've got one already now. If anyone else has a question, do please throw it up, and we'll try and get through what we can in the time we have left. So the first question comes from Gemma, who has asked, what are the best arts interventions which allow us to involve the whole community in a nursing home? And so visual arts, writing, reading groups, etc., must have different strengths. I think people sometimes wonder, we kind of associate dementia with the loss of words, and so that actually somehow working with literature is almost the most difficult thing to do. So I wonder if you've kind of, Sinead, you've worked a little bit with theatre, and Kate, should we maybe come to you, what you've found has worked kind of from different art forms, or if it's possible to mix them maybe?
I can tell you that different art forms do have different strengths. So, and it really depends also on if it's passive or active. So engaging someone in songwriting is different than playing music for the person, or reading to somebody is different than having people compose things. Anne Basting's work, her Penelope project, and also the I Won't Grow Up, involved actually doing theater in the community of the nursing home over a year. And the thing I loved about this, although, difficult perhaps to scale, is when she did the I Won't Grow Up, so this is the Peter Pan that was infused over the course of a year, there was so much interest in the community about the final performance, which involved the residents, the staff, and family members. And it was an immersive experience for spectators. But there was so much interest that the local grocery store, which was next to the nursing home, gave their staff 2 hours off to come and see it. And the nursing home director was worried she would have too many visitors, which is never a problem in a nursing home pre-COVID, is, how are we going to accommodate all these people? So it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to affect change on the community level, the benefit that Anne's work had is the staff felt very validated that the community got to see what they did, got to experience their life, and they felt like that they were often vilified, because we have a lot of commercials here in the US about nursing home abuse and lawyers you can call. And so they feel like when they go to work that they're viewed as these terrible predators. And it was just cathartic for everyone. But there are a lot of things, depending on whether, again, you're looking at individuals or communities, a lot of things that can be really effective.
And Sinead?
And one size doesn't fit all either. There's not one thing that might fit everybody. You talked about wheeling everybody into the same room. So when we started reading rooms in the care home and everybody was wheeled in, I had to say to the manager, look, yes, we'll do this. It's far too big, but at least it'll give people an opportunity to see what it's like. But it's not going to be this big, wide, room every week. It's better in a smaller group where people can engage better. And only those who want to engage. So you have to find things at particular groups. And I know that's really difficult in care homes to get something where you are. But even that one-to-one that you're doing, Shazzy, that is just as equally important. And I know sometimes, when our QIA comes in and they're, on their list, and you say, well, who's doing what and when to get them all together, and that individual work as well is just as powerful and really, really important. More important for people that won't come out of their rooms.
Our next question is from Jane, who says she was struck by the sharing in the Living Words project, and asked, do you think that it's important that the arts output is then kind of performed or shared? And I guess I kind of want to tag my own question onto that, as to what extent you can, there's a kind of follow-on role for practitioners. There's the actual work itself and the value that brings. And then there is this question of going out into the world and to some extent becoming a kind of advocate for the people who perhaps can't advocate for themselves, if that makes sense. And to what extent this is very important work for the people who are experiencing it, but is there also an element of activism to it? So Shaz, perhaps you could let us know how you feel about that one.
I think all those things are important. I think first and foremost, the one-to-one work, working with someone, and then they will have a book of their words. Now, that person may not want to come to a sharing. We do invite everyone, and most people do come to a sharing. And actually for other people, for other residents to hear their words, very often if they haven't been so crazy about the idea, that is very empowering for them. It's really empowering. Carers will hear their words, the staff, all the staff, any staff who can come. And then also for us, it's very important to take, not for us to be talking about people living with a dementia, but for them to be able to speak for themselves. So to take their words, and their words are generally kind of the cornerstone of the performances that we take out. The anthologies, of course, are their words. Sometimes this last one was also the words of relatives and staff. So I think it's really important to get people, to get out the words of people living with a dementia. So because there are a lot of misconceptions about kind of maybe a very narrow idea of what that might be like.
Sinead, is that something, would you agree with that kind of role?
Because we do have a choir, and they did want to share, you know, their performances, and we were able to be part of the Every Voice Festival. So there's the choral festival, which is the big festival, but then this is an attachment to the festival where anybody can sing. So we were part of that, but that was so successful. And our Melodies choir made such a big impact at it that they decided that they would have the Every Voice Festival as its own entity, which was really amazing, because then lots of other groups were able to come and be part of that. And we were even able to do it virtually last year. So sometimes that sharing is really important, that it can work as a catalyst. And then sometimes, you know, people see things and think, gosh, I didn't hear about your project, I didn't know about your project, you know, and you make links with other people as well. And then there are other jumping off points to other projects that happen. So yeah, it is important.
And yeah, Kate, I guess kind of to close then, that question of value, is kind of advocacy or activism something that you think plays into that idea of value?
Absolutely. One of the frustrating things I come across a lot is that people want to see a demonstrated value of the arts. So they want you to do a randomized controlled trial and show that, 5 doses of poetry equals, 1 dose of donepezil, and that, and that's kind of how people think about it. But can you prove to me? And instead, the question really needs to be, again, how do we express the act of being human? What value do you place on 10 amazing moments that you have in a day that might otherwise be filled with routine? I mean, I think we would all, if given a choice of nothing and 10 minutes of something really amazing, we would all pay whatever we could to get those 10 minutes. And so I think we really, the arts, really the transformative power can't be understated. And if we start looking at the arts as being that essential part of who we are, I think that we will value it as we should, as being a really important part of who we are, no matter where we are.
Thank you. We got one last comment, which is just from Gemma, which says, open up nursing homes to their local community sounds like a great outcome. And I think all of us would probably say that in the work that we've done, that kind of process of opening out is ultimately the thing that we'd value. I want to thank all of our panelists, kind of Kate, Shazia and Sinead, for joining us today. There is still one more panel event to come this afternoon that is going to be starting at 4:00, where Jan Carson is going to be in conversation in a one-to-one chat with Davy McElhenney. I think that is how you pronounce his surname. I hope that got that right. So do stay tuned, as they say, for the final panel. There's also a gala reading this evening. But thank you once again, everybody, and I hope that everybody watching got something out of this to kind of take away. Thanks.
Thank you.